This is the process of arranging a funeral at McCartney Family Funerals. Families reach out to us at different stages during the process of thinking to plan a funeral for their loved ones. Sometimes people reach out to us to plan a funeral for themselves. They might be suffering from a terminal illness or just aging, as we all do, and they might be thinking of making some plans for the future. Other times people reach out to us when their loved ones are sick and in hospital, and they're thinking they might want to have some plans down before their loved one passes away. Other times we hear from people after their loved one has passed. All of these are okay. You can reach out to us at any time, whether it's just to ask some questions or if the time has come where we need to plan a celebration of life for your loved one. When somebody calls in to plan a funeral for their loved one, we'll take some basic information from them. We want to know the person's name, date of birth, date of passing, that address, where they passed away. We'll also want to know information for their next of kin, so we know who we need to contact and speak to. We may also ask questions like what that person might have wanted for their funeral. Did they want a burial or a cremation? Are there any cultural considerations that we need to think about? From there, we make a time to meet with the next of kin and the family, where we will sit down and plan their funeral. We go from start to finish planning every aspect of their funeral, from something that's traditional in a church to something that's completely different. Nothing is ever too hard. We ask all the questions that we would need for births, deaths and marriages to go on the death certificate, and we would step through every process from then on. Sometimes it might be hard for family to decide what they might like on a tribute card or order of service. We'd like to give our graphic designers some creative liability, so we'll tend to ask, did Mum have any favourite colours? Did she have any hobbies? Were there any things that she enjoyed? Or would you have an idea of what you might want this to look like? Sometimes it's also tough to think about how many people might be attending the funeral. We don't send out RSVPs and invitations, so it's hard to think about how many tribute cards might we need? How many people are we going to be catering for? So once again, we help to step our families through each one of these. We talk about flower options, what kind of flowers you might like. Would you like us to provide the flowers, or did Mum have a full garden that you would like to take some flowers from to place on top of the coffin? Sometimes bringing flowers from the garden can be more meaningful and a really beautiful touch. We also talk to families about whether they would like a coffin or a casket, and then we step them through all the different options that are available. It's up to each individual family what they choose and what's right for their needs. It's really important when planning a funeral service or a celebration of life for someone that you love, and then for us when we're assisting in that we're taking those person's likes and interests into account. Sometimes for people, having a church service is absolutely what's right, and that's okay. Other times there might be things that are a bit different, having it in a different non-traditional location, and that's also okay. And we're here to step you through every part of that process, offering different venue ideas and then other things that we need to include to make the service everything that you want it to be. Nothing is out of reach and nothing is too hard. Once we've gone through all the choices with the family about what they might want for the funeral or celebration of life, we'll then reach out to either a member of clergy or an officiant to help that family with the next part of that process. We'll also look at booking venues and arranging all the other bits and pieces that we need to bring this funeral or celebration of life all together. I think sometimes people are under the misconception that the funeral directors are the ones in control. We're not. It's the family. It's what they want. We just help to bring everything all together. When planning a funeral service, one of the biggest choices is if it will be a cremation or a burial. So talking about burials, if it was a burial, is there an existing plot? Is there one that needs to be reopened, one that has been pre-purchased, or are we looking at a new plot? Would it be in the lawn section of the cemetery or a monumental section, or would it be in a vault? So those are some common questions. With a cremation service, there aren't as many questions, but sometimes if the family has pre-purchased a niche or a spot for ashes interment in a cemetery, it's also important for us to know these things too. When talking about our multimedia choices, sometimes families will opt to have a photo reflection. If that's the case, we'll step through the ways that the photos need to be collated and then uploaded so that we can format it into a beautiful production. We'll also go through and talk about the difference between orders of service and mass books, tribute cards, bookmarks, and prayer cards. We'll also speak to family about different song choices that they might like to have. We speak to families about how they would like us to care for their loved one in the mortuary. Do they have a pacemaker or defibrillator? If they do, then that's one that we might need to remove. Have they been undergoing any radiation treatment? That's something that's also important for us to know. If it's a gentleman, we will ask if they would like to be clean shaven or if they have a moustache or a beard. If it's a lady, we'll ask if they would like any makeup applied. We don't generally cosmetize men unless we need to. We'll also ask about any clothing they might want to dress their loved one in. I always think something that they're comfortable in. If they're comfortable in a suit and tie, do that. If they're comfortable in board shorts and a singlet, then that is also absolutely fine. We'll ask about any jewellery. If they have any rings, necklaces, earrings, would the family like us to have them removed and returned, or would they like them to stay with their loved one? We'll ask as well if the family would like any locks of hair. Sometimes a family might want handprints or fingerprint moulds done, and we can organise this at that time as well. It's really important that we ask all the questions that we can during the funeral arrangement process. That way, on the day of the funeral, it allows for a much smoother flow of the day. Knowing what songs the family wanted, what they want done with the flowers at the end of the service, and any ideas that they had for how the service was going to run makes for a much better flow of the day. We want the day to be as wonderful as it can be in such a terrible time. You only get one chance at a funeral. You don't get a chance for a do-over. So it's really important that we get this right. After the funeral arrangement, what we will do is either give you or send you a copy of the funeral service agreement so that you have that. We'll also send you a copy of the births, deaths and marriages lodgement for the death certificate, just so that you can double check and make sure that there are no errors. We'll also send through copies of multimedia stationery, so orders of service, tribute cards. That way you get to proof them before we send them to print. On the day of the service, I would be there to make sure the day runs as smoothly as possible, as well as an assistant or two. We make sure all the choices that you made during the funeral arrangement process. After the funeral, we give you a little bag that might have any extra copies of service stationery, a memorial book, a copy of the photo reflection, any personal items from your loved one like locks of hair or jewellery, and any cards we may have taken on your behalf during the service. After the funeral, we'll also be in touch, whether just to check on you, to let you know that the death certificate and ashes are ready, or to help you with anything else you might need. Everybody is different and every family is different and all of their needs are different. If you prearrange your own funeral, then instead of your family going through all those choices, you go through all the choices. You pick your own coffin, you pick what kind of multimedia items you might like, you pick your own flowers, you decide what you want to be dressed in, where you want to have the funeral. All of those choices are yours. At the time of the person's passing, then the family then go over those choices in case they wanted to add something or maybe tweak it and make it a little bit different. It's really important to us though that when someone pre-plans their funeral, their choices are honoured and respected, and we want to stick to what they want as much as possible. This is the process of arranging a funeral at McCartney Family Funerals.